So let's get started. I wanted to study with you the machlokas between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam about Tefillin. And this you'll see, again, I don't know if you have it yet, but if you don't, it's fine. I'm just making a note of it. It's on page 198 in the Hegyonei Halacha. Okay, I'm going to give some background before we get to the Hegyonei Halacha per se. And the reason for that is because, if you may recall, we were studying, again, it's quite a while ago, the concept of Hesech Hadas in Tefillin. And that was on page 187, which I'm sure you have. But that we finished. But then I realized that the Isur Hesech Hadas really belongs to a broader topic, which I'd like to address before we get to Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. And that's called Kedushas ha'adam kishehu meniach tefillin, meaning when tefillin are munachas al ha'adam, he takes on a new kedusha. Let me explain. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos on Daf Mem Tes, Omer Rav Yanai, tefillin tzrichim guf noki. Ke'elisha Baal Knafayim. Maihi, what does it mean, guf noki? Amar Abaye, shelo yafiach bahem. Okay, that's Abaye. Rava Amar shelo yishan bahem. He shouldn't sleep in his tefillin. Now the Gemara asks, why is Elisha called Baal Knafayim? Pamachas Gazra Malchus Romi Harsha Zera Yisrael Shekol Meniach Tefillin Yinakru Esmocho by Elisha Menicham V'Yotze L'Shuk Ra Kazdar Echad Rotz Mifanov V'Rotz Achrav. So he runs away from this Kazdar, and the Kazdar is running after him. Kemen Shigia Etzlo Notlan Meirosho V'Ochazan B'Yado. So he takes off his tefillin and he holds in his hand this Elisha. Amalo, the Kazdar says to him, what are you holding on to? Amalei Kanfe Yona. Poshat es Yodo, V'nimtzu Kanfe Yona. Leficha Korno so Elisha Baal Knafayim. Okay, that's the famous Agadah of Elisha Baal Knafayim. And we get back to the issue of Guf Noki. The Rambam writes, and we've quoted this in the past, Perek Daled Milchus Tefillin Halacha Hey, Kedushas Tefillin Kedushasam Gedolahi, Kol Zmansha HaTefillin Barosho Shel Onom V'Al Zroo, Hu Onov V'Yirei Shamayim V'Eino Nimshach B'Schok U'B'Sicha B'Tela V'Eino Mahar B'Machshavos Ros El V'Fana Libo B'Divrei HaEmes V'Atzedek Lefichach Tzorech Odom L'Shtadel Lioson Olav Kol Hayom Shemitzvosan Kachi, Omru Olav HaRab Talmido Shel Rabbeinu HaKadosh Shekol Yomov Lo Ra'u Sheholach Arba Amos below Torah or below Tzitzis or below Tefillin. Then in Masechta Shabbos, but this time on Daf Yud Beis, Omar Rabba Bar Avhuna Chayav Adam LeMashmesh B'Tefillin Kol Shah V'Shah Kal V'Chomer Mitzitz. Matzit she'ein bo el azkora achas, Omer Torah, v'hoyal metzchot tamid, shelo yasiach daito mimenu tefillin sheyesh lem azkoras harbe, alachas kama v'kama. So we see that there's an Isur Hesech Hadas from tefillin, and therefore he's chayav in bishmush. He's got to be constantly connected to the tefillin without any shichacha, without forgetting about his tefillin. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Orach Chaim Simon Chav Ches, Chayav Adam LeMashmesh B'Tefillah B'Chol Shah, Shelo Yasiach Daito Mehem, V'Yamashmesh B'Shal Yad Tchila, U'Ksheyomar U'Kshartem Lios Al Yodecha, Yamashmesh B'Shal Yad. Then Sheyomar v'hoyu totafos beinecha yemashmesh b'shel rosh. So this is the Shulchan Aruch. I mean, you can't blame me for writing the text. The Shulchan Aruch, in the context of the Isur Hesech Hadas, requires that we be mashmesh first in the Tefillin Shel Yad, and then in the Tefillin Shel Rosh. Now, if you recall, we mentioned that according to Rava, the Isur of Hesech Hadas expresses itself in Shena. And the Gemara picks this up. Lo yochaz adam tefillin biyado v'sefer Torah b'Yisrael v'yispalel v'lo yashtin b'mayim v'lo yished b'hem lo shenas keva v'lo shenas aroi. So it seems like the Isur Shena in tefillin is an absolute Isur without any exception. It doesn't matter whether he had a shenas aroi or a shenas keva. However, what we want to do is we want to see that based on the Gemara in Sukkah on Daf Chav Vav, Tani Chad Yoshen Adam B'Tefillin Shenes Aroi. V'Tanya Idach Bein Keva Bein Aroi. V'Tanya Idach Lo Keva V'Lo Aroi. Lo Kasha. Had Noket Le B'Yodei. Had Manche B'Reishei. Had Paras Sudra Le. So we're going to go through the Rashis here and see these three categories of Noket Le B'Yodei, Manche Le B'Reishei, and Paras Sudra Le. The Gemara concludes by saying, Kamashinas Aroi, Toni Rami Bar Yechezkel, Kedei Hiluch Mea Amma. So Rashi says the following: Did Noket Le B'Yodei, Lo Keva V'Lo Aroi. If he's holding on to his tefillin in his hands, he's enjoined from sleeping, whether it is a shenas keva or a shenas aroi. Shema yiplo miyad. We're afraid that while he's asleep, he might drop the tefillin from his hand. But the manchi bereishe, if he's wearing his tefillin, Rashi says aroi mutter. He's allowed to sleep a shenas aroi, the keva osur. Now, why is keva osur? After all, he's not holding on to his tefillin, so there's no fear that they might fall. And we just finished saying that the reason why he can't sleep in tefillin is because if he's holding on to his tefillin and he falls asleep, he might drop his tefillin. But here it's manche bereishe. So the logic and the principle of Rava of Shema Yishan does not apply over here because he's wearing his tefillin. So what's the big deal if he falls asleep while he's wearing his tefillin? So Rashi adds two words, Shema Yafia. In other words, now we go back to Abaye. If you're talking about holding on to your tefillin, then there's no difference between a shenas keva and a shenas aroi. But if he's wearing his tefillin, then we prohibit a shenas keva because of Sheva Yafia. But in a shenas aroi, we're not afraid lest he's mafia. Now we have a third case of Paras Sudra Le. He nicham eitzel rashosav, Rashi says. His tefillin are by his head side. And in such a case, he's not wearing his tefillin, he's not holding his tefillin. Then he's allowed to sleep, ben keva, ben aroi, because he's neither holding his tefillin nor wearing his tefillin. We have no chashash Hashem yafiach, but he's not wearing his tefillin. We have no chashash he might drop the tefillin because he's not holding his tefillin in his hand while he sleeps. Let him sleep next to his tefillin. So it comes out, to summarize the sugya, you're not allowed to sleep with tefillin on if you're holding on to the tefillin. And that's an absolute Isur Shena when you're holding on to the tefillin, even if he only chaps a shenas aroi because he might drop the tefillin. If they're on his head, then he's not allowed to sleep a shenis keva. And the reason for that is because Shem Yafiach Bahem, but he's allowed to sleep a shenis haroy. Now, although it's true that during a shenis haroy, we don't have to be choshesh for Shem Yafiach, but what about the Iser Hesech Hadas? Even if he's only sleeping a very short, he's taking a short nap, he'll be out for 5-10 minutes. It doesn't matter. He's going to be Mesiach Das with his tefillin for those 5-10 minutes. Why should Shenas Haroy, while he's wearing tefillin, be allowed? Does everybody have the kasha here? I want to repeat it one more time. What we're saying is that if he's wearing his tefillin, then we're only worried about Shemi Yafiach, and therefore Shenas Haroy is mutter. But the question now is, okay, forget about Shemi Yafiach. Shenas Haroy should be also because of Hesech Hadas. He's not thinking about his tefillin. So I want to read to you the Rosh. As I mentioned in the past, the Rosh wrote a chibur called Hilchos Tefillin. V'im Toma, Heich Shinas Haroy Mutter v'Asol Asiyach Daito Man u'B'Shoshe V'Snamnem, even when he's dozing off, he's Siyach Daito Mehem. V'Haya Omer Harav Rabbeinu Yonah Zal D'Mitoch Divrei HaRambam Matzanu Tiritz L'Davar Zeh. D'lo avi hesech hadas elo kisha omed b'kalas rosh u'b'schok. So it means that hesech hadas is not a lack of consciousness of his tefillin, but rather hesech hadas is a negative kind of machshava of kalas rosh and schok. And this you'll see in Hegyonei Halacha on page 187. For some reason, he doesn't quote the Rambam. I'm not exactly sure why. But he says the Rosh in the name of Rabbeinu Yonah. Kisha omei b'yira u'misasek b'tzrachav afal pisha osek b'malachto b'umnaso v'yein daito aleim mamish. He's not thinking about his tefillin consciously because he's busy with whatever he's busy with, and he's osek b'malachto. So it's ein daito aleim mamish. Ein zed nikra hesech hadas v'chein nami kisha misnamnem ein kan hesech hadas. Why? Because he's not in a state of kalas rosh and schok. I mean, you and I could have said that maybe any sort of shena, even if it's aroy, is like schok and kalas rosh. No, it's not. It's that parva situation. He's not thinking about the tefillin, but he's not in a matzav of what? Of kalas rosh. Now, what we have is the following: a whole school of Rishonim, the Balamor, the Rosh, Rabbeinu Yonah, they all allow Shenas Haroy in tefillin. The Ravid paskins that even Shenas Haroy asura kishat tefillin olav. So I guess the Ravid is assuming that the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Mem Tes that quotes Rava as saying Lo Yishan Bahem, Rava didn't qualify. And lo yishabem applies even to a shenas aroy. The problem is, what do we do with the other sugyas? Okay, the sugya bracha is not so schwer because that sugya prohibits all shena because he's holding on to his tefillin. But what are we going to do with the sugya in sukkah that establishes that there's an issue even shenas harod? Yeah, but the Gemara says that's only because he's holding on to his tefillin. The Ravid illegally extends the Gemara to apply even when he's not holding on to his tefillin. And he prohibits the shenas harod while he's wearing tefillin. Well, why is that so? And the Gemara says there's only a problem Shevi Yafiyah for him. And that problem is resolved by a shenas harod. Now the Rambam only adds one point here to all the other Rishonim. He's matir shenas harod, but he adds a condition. He's got to sleep a shenas harod while he's wearing tefillin in a way that he won't. He can guarantee himself that he won't fall into a shenas keva. How does he do that? He puts his head, the Rambam says, between his knees. How long can you sleep in that position? So the Rambam paskins tefillin strichim guf noki, she zoyer shelo teitzi men ruach milamata, calls manchu ola, lefichach also lisho behem, lo shenas keva, v'lo shenas harod, ela im hiniach aleim sudar. Okay, we'll see about that. The ketzadu ose, how can he sleep a shenas harod while he's wearing tefillin? Meniach rosho bein birkav hu yoshev v'yoshev. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Sima Mem Daled, as we quoted earlier, calls man shatfilin b'rosho b'zroa asur lishan b'hem afilu shenas harod. He's not differentiating between tefillin shel rosh or tefillin shel yad. He prohibits all shena. However, there is a scenario which Yoshev Shenas harod, if Meniach Rosho Ben Birkov Vu Yoshev is Yoshev. It was quite practical to ask the question about sleeping in tefillin back in the day when they wore tefillin the whole day. During the course of the day, he gets a little tired, and he wants the cup of drimmel. And the question is if it's mutar or asur. It sounds like halacha l'maaseh would be asur unless he puts his head between his knees. So the poskim want to know, people somehow, when they wear tefillin, will put their head down on the ground, on the stender, and they'll fall into a light sleep. Should we wake them up? And the answer is we keep Mulamid schus on them. We don't have to wake them up because Nikar Aleim Shalom Nishtaku B'Shem. From the very fact that they laid down on the table, you put your arm on the table, you lay down, that's like putting your head in between your legs. It's quite clear that he's not going to sleep. He's just dozing off a little. And we can rely discourse on it. However, again, if you're holding on to your tefillin, that's already a whole different story. Then you're not allowed to sleep even a shenas aron. So again, if he's not holding on to his tefillin, and therefore there's no chashash of the tefillin falling from him, then it's okay for him to sleep. Now, are you allowed to eat while you're wearing tefillin? The Gemara again in Brachas Lamed Hey. Omar Rab Yitzchak Nichnas Lesudas Keva Choletz Tefillah V'Akach Nichnas. He should remove his tefillin before he eats a Sudas Keva. Upliga de Rab Chia. Dom Rab Chia Meiniach al Shulchano. Wait a second. What does he mean? Meiniach al Shulchano. I don't get it. What's Meiniach al Shulchano? 1 second. You know what I think he means by Meiniach al Shulchano? He's wearing his tefillin. He's about to start a meal. Take off his tefillin, put it on the table, and then put it on again after he finishes his meal. But again, all this is for a Sudas Keva. What's the din in an Achilas Aroy? Shulchan Aruch writes in Orach Chaim Simon Mem, Hanichnas leSudas Keva, Choltzon u'meinichan al hashulchan ad zman habracha, v'chozer meinicha. I don't know what he means by ad zman habracha. Maybe he means until he benches. Aval achilas haroy ein tzarich lecholtzon. He does not have to take off his tefillin for an achilas haroy. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aroy nire the shir aroy hu kibetza hu kibin sukkah. Just like you are not allowed to eat a kibetza outside of the sukkah, you can only eat less than a kibetza outside the sukkah. That's because it's an achilas haroy. So too, if you want to eat during the time you're wearing tefillin, it's got to be less than a kibetza. I'm just not sure. What does it mean less than a kibetza? I mean, does he mean less than a kibetza of lechem or mizonos, or less than a kibetza of anything? I don't know. I want to see this inside for a minute. Do you have a Mishnah Berurah or a Chaim Simon Mem? Let's see. not too clear here. He says, Nira the Shir Achilas Aroi who kibetzo kibin sukkah. Doesn't say anything more than that. I mean, I'm inclined to believe that everything that he's eating amounts to a kibetzo, or less than a kibetzo. We just see if anything in the Bear Heitev. No, I don't see anything here. I don't know. Do you agree with my understanding that when he says less than a kibetza, he means everything that he's eating together amounts to less than a kibetza? Otherwise, he should have said kidei beitza shall pass.
Dear Shu, Mishnah Brewer brings a whole bunch of conditions.
Can you read it out loud?
Well, it's kind of long, but he says,
Oh.
Achilas pasur dagim uvina sharmine machol. Mishnah Brewer writes over there, Shadinam keperish, hafim kava alem nechshavas achilas aroi. That things like pasur v'dagim
Then he's
uvina.
learning kibetza means pass, I guess.
Yeah, that's part of it.
He can eat cheese and fruits and vegetables, even while he's wearing tefillin. That's a big kula. Does he tell you who says it?
Well, he's quoting all the other simonim that deal with it.
Oh, I see. All right.
But he says, those other things should not be eaten with a kviyus.
Yeah, but I think that makil for someone who's Torah so mnaso, he's learning Torah. They don't want to force him to take off his tefillin. I don't know. I have to ask my grandsons who are learning in Zilberman, where they wear tefillin the whole day. Now, the question is, he stops in order to eat a meal and he takes off his tefillin. Does he have to make a bracha when he puts his tefillin on again? So the Bir Halacha here in Simon Mem goes back and forth on this. He quotes Yerushalmi. And Ludina, he paskins Sarach Levarich. That after he eats his Suda, he should make another bracha. Yeah, Joe?
I was just saying, if we're, it seems like he's going along if I'm following his thinking right, what is he not trying to get to the same idea that it's got to do with his awareness, that if he's going to have pus, if he's going to have those kind of things, something heavy, then he's going to possibly
He may see das from his tefillin.
Right, but fruits or whatever, that's why he's saying you don't have to take them off. That's he's talking about eating. The whole concept with the eating is really with regards to Hasiach Das. That's what he's trying to get at.
Let me just say the following. You might be right for someone, according to some shittas, but the Gemara that we mentioned here in Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey, Omer Rav Yitzchak Hanichnas L'Sudas Keva Choletz Tefillah, Rashi says, Shema Yishtakir B'Suda. They used to drink wine during the meal. And we're afraid if he sits down, says Rashi, and he eats a full meal, he might get intoxicated from the wine. And again, that's not the state of Kedushas Tefillin that you want to be in when you're wearing tefillin. A drunkard should not be wearing tefillin. Now, again, since Hesech Hadas from tefillin is all part of the Kedusha of a person when he's wearing tefillin, then it all fits into one picture. No, it's Rashi saying if he gets drunk, he doesn't have the Kedusha that he needs, like the tzitz, where he's linking up to his tefillin, because he doesn't have his wits about him. And we're afraid if he eats a sudas keva, he might get drunk.
Right, and that's with pus. He's not going to be drinking. I presume they're understanding that he's not going to.
As Yudi said, the poskim say the mikar din. Again, it's not necessarily lechatchila, but mikar din you could eat, cheese and have a couple of pieces of herring and some some chocolate cake. I don't know what you're eating over there. Mini de targamina. Maybe you're having some, chocolates or so, a shahakal. You're not being, you're not taking yourself out of the state of kedusha for tefillin. Now, Rabbosai, everything that we've been discussing now today is about the person who's wearing the tefillin and the kedusha that he has to attain while he's wearing the tefillin. But let's say a few words about the Kedusha of the Tefillin themselves. The Gemara says in Brachas Daf Chav Daled, Omer Rav Chanina, Ani Raisi es Rebbe shetola tefillah. He actually hung it up on a peg. Meisvei, so the Gemara says, wait a minute, I told a tefillah of Yitul Lo Chayav, a terrible thing. Dorshei Chamuras Amru, V'hoyu Chayecha Tluyim Loch Mikineged Zeh. I told it tefillin. So how could Rab Chanina hang up his tefillin? Lo kasha. Ha b'ritzua, ha b'kitzitza. In other words, is he hanging up the ritzuos or the batim themselves? The bias of the tefillin he's hanging on a peg. Maybe he knows how to balance it properly. Ibay Sema. Loshna ritzua, loshna ktsitza, asur. No matter whether he hangs it by the ritzua, or even if he hangs it on the bias, it's asur. I v'chitola Rebbe. I'm not sure what he means by Rebbe. He should say Rebbe Chanina. Bekiste tola. Okay, what is bekiste tola? It was inside. It was inside the tick. They used to have a tick for tefillin like we have today, and he was hanging up the pocketbook. What's it called? A tick in English? A satchel. I don't know what word you want to use. Where the tefillin is inside the satchel, and that's okay. So why did it make such a big deal? Anira Isi. Oh, it's Rebbe. I'm sorry, I meant it. Right, that he was told his tefillin. He wasn't really told his tefillin. Mal de tema tiboya nocha kisefer Torah kamashmo. A sefer Torah, even if it's wearing an artik, it's in its tick, you're still not allowed to hang it up, and you have to put it standing in an Aron Kodesh or maybe flat on a bima. So Shulchan Aruch paskins also litlos tefillin bein bebatim bein beritzuos havel mutar litlosam bekison. You're allowed to keep them hanging there while they're in their nartik. And the Mishnah Berurah there in Siman Mem writes that Sefer Torah also litloso bechol gavna afilu kshu ba'aron kodesh. He's not allowed to let them hang, so to speak, on a hook, even inside the Aron Kodesh. But then the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chai Adam. Da'afilu k'sha'aron kodesh mechubar b'yisedos l'kosel asur. You're not allowed to have the Sefer Torah hanging in midair, even in a situation where the Aron Kodesh is nailed down to the ground. Kol she'ein tachav omeid b'davar ma. As long as the Sefer Torah is not sitting on something, on a platform, on a shelf, then it's us. Usfarim, kigon sifrei Talmud v'chayotze, doma l'tefillin. It's similar to tefillin. And we said with regard to tefillin, as long as it's encased, you're allowed to be told. So you have a Gemara, a Talmud, Sifrei Talmud, and it's inside a tick. You're allowed to hang it up. Yeah. Okay, now we want to talk about Rabbeinu Tam. Where's Rabbeinu Tam? Oh, here's Rabbeinu Tam. Okay. So there are 4 parshiyos in the Torah of Tefillin. Bo, and at the end of Bo it says Kaddish Li Kol B'chor. Then we have another parsha of Tefillin in Bo, which is V'hoya Kiviyacha. And then in the parsha of Kriyat Shema, which appears twice in Sefer Dvarim, we have Tefillin. So these are the 4 parshas of Tefillin, about which the Torah writes, V'hoya la'os al yodcha u'tatafos beinecha. So we write the 4 parshas on a cloth, and we put them into the bottom of both Tefillin Shel Yad, Tefillin Shel Rosh, with one difference, as we discussed in great length. And in Tefillin Shel Yad, all the 4 parshas are written in one cloth, whereas in Tefillin Shel Rosh, we divide up the cloth into 4 parts. Each one gets another parsha, and then we put it into the different inner chambers of the Shel Rosh. Now the Sofer has to write the parshas of Tefillin in the order they're written in the Torah. And that's explicit in the Shulchan Aruch. Nobody argues about that. However, where do we put the 4 parshios in the bottom of Tefillin? That's a major machlokas. And it all boils down to the Gemara in Menachos Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis, Tanu Rabbanan, Kesad Sodron. What is the Seder of the Hanochas Tefillin inside the bottom? And the Gemara says the following: Kaddish Li, V'hoya Kiviyacha. So notice that we started in Parshas Bo and Sefer Shmos, and then we jumped to Sefer Dvarim. Where is it? I think in Re'eh, I'm not sure. Anyway, in Perek Yud Aleph. So Kaddish Li V'hoya Kiviyacha V'yamin. Which way, Yamin? Yamin of the person who's wearing the tefillin, the person who sees the person who's wearing the tefillin, I don't know. Then it says, V'hoyim shamoa mismol. That's on the left side. All right. So Rashi writes Hadik Tony Liel Kadesh V'hoya Kiviyacha. Right, we said he skipped from Kadesh and Bo all the way to V'hoya V'yacha. Miyamino Shel Kore Ka'amu. The hashtag Shu Kore Kidarko Miyamin was small. That's how we read Lashon Kodesh. Nimtza Koran Kisidron. Because he puts Kadesh on the Yamin, and therefore he reads it Kisidron. Just 1 second, but what happened to V'hoya Kiviyacha? 1 second, maybe Kadesh. Just 1 second. Does that include V'hoya Kiviyacha? Yeah. He says Kadesh and V'hoya V'yacha, which are sequential in the end of Parshas Bo. Miyamin. So when he's reading it from Yamin to Smol, he's reading it in the exact same Seder that they appear in the Torah. V'hadatana Ibcha, the Mashma Kadesh and V'hoya Kiviyacha, right, where we skipped. So when it says Kadesh V'hoya Kiviyacha Mismol, which is exactly opposite of what we have Kadesh V'hoya, that means Yamin Shel Kore. So again, it all depends on the perspective you're starting with. Are you looking at the Kore, or are you looking at the, meaning the person who's wearing the tefillin, or the person who is standing and reading? But it's always going to be Kisidron, says Rashi, starting from Yamin and moving towards the small. The Koshel Rabbeinu Tam. Damai Palginu Shekore Shtayim Rishonos Miyamin Ushtayim Achronos Mismol. I thought that the answer to that question was that it's Shmos versus Dvarim. Rabbeinu Tam is not satisfied. Hayelo Lomar Rishona Miyamin V'chol Acheres Mismol. O Ibcha Gimel Rishonis Miyamin Revius Mismol. Uvefarish Rabbeinu Tam Kadesh V'hoya Kiviyacha Miyamin Shel Kore Umismol Shel Kore Havishma Mibachutz V'achrea V'hoyim Shemo Mibifnim. So again, according to Rashi, it depends what perspective. From the perspective of somebody who's reading it, now I'm not talking about the one who's wearing it, then you go from right to left. Kadesh li Hoya Kiviyacha Shma and Hoyim Shema. Everything is Kisidram, like the parashiyos of the Torah. From the perspective of the Meiniach, it's exactly the reverse. It's V'hoyim Shema, Shema, V'hoyim Kiviyacha, and Kaddish Li. Rabbeinu Tam didn't accept this because if all the Parshias are organized Misudaros, Lefi Seder Shen Ksuvos Batorah, why did the Brisa divide them up into two groups? Kaddish Li, V'hoyim Shema, V'hoyim Kiviyacha, Niyamin, Shema, V'hoyim Shema, Mismo. That was the problem that Rabbeinu Tam raised. So what does he suggest? Shemischalkos b'sidron l'shtei kvutzos. We have to really set them up in two groups. Hakvutza Rishona, the first one, is Kadesh V'hoyim Kiviyacha. Fine. Mitchila miyamin shel koreh. So the person who's standing on the outside looking at the Parshios, he's going to see from the right, moving one step to the left, from Kaddish Li to V'hoyim Kiviyacha. Now we talk about Michutz Pnima. Now we get to the second Kfutza, which is Shema and V'hoyim Shema. Maschila Mismol Shel Koreh. That we're going to start on the left side. So it comes out like this. According to Rabbeinu Tam, we split the four parashas into two subsets. We have one subset we'll call Kaddish Li and V'hoyim Kiviyacha, and the other V'hoyim Shema and Shema. Now, V'hoyim Shema is in Dvarim Perek Yud Aleph, and Kriyat Shema is in Perek Vav. So if it would have gone Kisidron, then after Kadesh and V'hoyim Kiviyacha would come Shema and then V'hoyim Shema. Instead, he has V'hoyim Shema first and Shema second. So let's now look at it from the perspective of the one who's wearing the tefillin. He starts from the right and goes to the left. The parsha that's most on the right is Shema. Then he gets to V'hoyim Shema, then V'hoyim Kiviyacha, and then Kaddish Li. So wherein lies the difference between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam? It seems like the difference is between Shema first and V'hoyim Shema second, as we move from right to left. Or shall we put V'hoyim Shema first and then Shema? I'm not sure if I'm right. Let me just double check one more time. He says here on page 198, Nimtza l'das Rabbeinu Tam makdimim parshas V'hoyim Shema l'parsha Shema. Now we started with Kadesh, and then we went to V'hoyim Kiviyacha, and now we go to V'hoyim Shema. So the two Avayos which open up with the word V'hoya are smuchos zu lezu. So again, Ladas Rashi, again, we have to get to the Shalyat, but I think the Shalyat, everybody agrees, since on one cloth it goes to Piseder Parshas. But in the Batim of Tefillin Shal Rosh, according to Rashi, once again, we want to maintain the Seder Shen Ksubas Batorah. And therefore, on the bias Rishon Mismol Shel Meniach, Shehu Miyamin Shel Omed Kenegdo, so we're all the way on the right, is Meniach Parshas Kadesh, and B'Bai Sheni Parshas Voyim Shema, and then in the third bias, it's the Parsha of Shema, according to Rashi, and the fourth bias is Voyim Shema. Avodas Rabbeinu Tam, Nosnim es Parshas B'Batim L'Fi Seder Hazeh Kadesh, Voyim Kiviyacha, and then Voyim Shema, and then Shema, which is not the Seder that is written in the Torah, but rather he ends up with Havayos Smuchos Zulazu. That is, in a nutshell, the Machlokes between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. So it's really interesting because according to Rabbeinu Tam, we have the Parsha Voyim Shema before the Parsha Shema. That's not the way it's written in the Torah. Now he writes here, Mistakel with Tefillin Shel Rashi, who with Tefillin Shel Rabbeinu Tam, Eini Yochel Lahavchin, Ezer Shel Rashi, Ezer Shel Rabbeinu Tam, El B'Shel Rosh Bilvad. So he's going to look at the Shel Rosh and he's going to know whether it's Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. Ketzad Yochel Lahavchin B'Neihem, how would he know? El Kabbalah Moshe Misinai Shekol Parshu Parsha Kodem Kodem Shenos Nosel Toch Habayis Golin Osa Misofa Litchilasa. Right, you roll it up backwards from the end, going back up to the beginning. The Karchen Osa B'Seir Shel Egel. I'm not sure what he means by Karchen Osa. I thought you put a little band around it in the middle, like a belt. He says Karchen Osa. The love of Bashir shall B'Seir shall Egel shall Chaper al Chetay. Yeshom today lahazkir Chetay Egel v'lo yer. She is good. Gomar Likro. Eino kosher as haksavos shel aseya. So if he's got extra hairs, Nisoviv osam zusviv zu kama pa'omim, ad shenisharos chavukos zu bezu. V'od zeh midirei kabol. Shektzos haseyar akorov soviv pashas voyim shemoa yetzu michutz labayis. So you take a look at your Tefillin Shel Rosh, you'll see some hairs that are coming out of the Parsha Voyim Shemoa. Lefichach mashchilin es haseyar derech hanekev shel tfiras hatartura. Right, tartura is the base, and he's going to thread the seyar through the hole in the base. Mul habayis shebo nimtzeis parshas Voyim Shemoa. Tefillin Shel Rashi sheparshas Voyim Shemoa nimtzeis bebayis haravi is Aser Yotze Derech HaChor Shebein Revi L'Shlishi. So I'm still trying to figure out, is there a machlokes between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam with regard to Tefillin Shel Yad? In Tefillin Shel Rosh, you have the Seder Parshias, and you can have, exactly where the hairs come up through the hole. He says here, Ra'isi shebizmanenu noagim laso shinui gam b'tefillin shel yad. Wow. B'derech chituch say ritzuas hatefillin. He says, "Hamachlokas bein Rashi Rabbeinu Tam b'seder haparshios b'tefillin shel yad b'seder ein ksuvim b'tefillin shel rosh b'seder shein nesunim b'bat." So Rabbeinu Tam is going to have a different seder of ksiva. In the Tefillin Shel Yad. So if I understand this correctly, and please straighten me out if I'm wrong, according to Rabbeinu Tam, in the seder of this one long klaf of the parshas that are written on that klaf of the Tefillin Shel Yad, the seder that you follow is identical to the seder of the batim going from right to left of the Tefillin Shel Rosh. Which means that Vayim Shema is going to be the third parsha. I'm trying to see if anyone says that explicitly. All right, it's late. So I'm going to make myself a note to just double check, make sure that I'm reading this correctly about the seder of the Tefillin Shel Yad, according to Rabbeinu Tam. And then I'd like to talk about whether we should wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, who should wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, or maybe we should not wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. So I'll bid you a very good week, and thanks for joining me. And we'll see each other next week. We'll make some more progress in our understanding of tefillin.